Hey there everyone, today we're going to have a talk about power scaling, resistances, and just generally how things feel in events. The structure of this video is going to be me talking through them in that order, and I'm going to splice in some random footage which is just for you to watch while I'm talking about things, of me doing the event with different power levels and stuff. But we're going to take a look at that at the end more so. I'm just going to talk about power scaling and resistances first of all. So power scaling has been fixed. This actually happened 3 months ago, but I wanted a bit of time to test things and to make sure I knew where we were at and that things were okay and stuff, and how to have a perspective on it. I made a video very shortly before saying power scaling wasn't fixed, because I'd unfortunately been announcing that it was, because I knew it was coming, but I thought it happened earlier than it did. So I made a video apologizing, saying sorry, that's not fixed yet. That was an Archer video when I was doing the event in that. But anyway, so very shortly afterwards it was fixed. It's been fixed for a while now, and I want to say how my theory for power scaling was actually wrong. So I believe this new theory is correct. Now the old theory, I need to kind of justify. Basically it was thinking about power relative to your power relative to the enemy power. So if we take a look here, you see my power is 160,000, and then if you look at the event, there is the required power for the event, which is 145,800, but the suggested power here, the 149,500, basically 150, that is the actual power of the enemies. The power required is just what you need to go into the event. So 150,000 is the power of the enemies, and I thought that your power, which, in this case 160,000, relative to the 150,000, that's what then scaled up the stats of the enemies. So let's say, so let's say I have 180,000 power, which is 20% more than 150,000. I thought, okay, it would look at that and say, okay, 20% more stats, that equals a 40% buff to the enemy stats. So I thought it was all relative, and that's how they did it. So it's just like, if you were over the suggested power, and the further you were above the suggested power, it did an exponential scaling of the enemy stats. That seemed like a very reasonable theory. It's kind of how I probably would have chosen to do it myself if I was a programmer. And back at the time when they first introduced this kind of system and I investigated it and stuff, it seemed to make a lot of sense with the numbers, and it looked very reasonable. Now over time it became a bit clearer that something was a bit off. It wasn't quite working that way, and when I reinvestigated it, and otherwise now, I just realized I think the actual way it works is the enemies simply scale to a certain number. It's not your power relative to their power, giving a stats buff and stuff. It's just like, no, enemies at 150,000 power have a certain amount of stats, and then if I was 180,000, it would be the enemies switch, and they're actually 180,000 power, and then they have a certain number of stats at 180,000 power. So this scaling just goes up exponentially, and basically higher power, the enemies go up in exponential stats. This is a problem for the long term, because when this was done, it was scaled kind of for where the normal power of players were like a lot lower. I can't remember what it was at the time. I think maybe it was like 80,000 or something like that. And now we're like 160,000 easily. I personally am 205,000 power. And so this exponential scaling doesn't work very well, because over this time we've gone up in stats in a linear fashion. So, as people have doubled in power, they've doubled in stats. Their gear is just literally double stats, but the enemies have gone up by more than double stats. So things got really, really challenging, and in fact, it was a particular power range from basically 180,000 power onwards. That's when it was just going up in a crazy way, and it was when a lot of people started hitting 180,000 power. Well, 180,000 to 220,000 was the range where it went from being challenging, starting to get challenging, to the point where 220,000 power plus, it was impossible. You just got killed so easily and that kind of stuff. So yeah, as people reached that, it became a problem, and luckily it's now been fixed, so it's not going to be a problem again. But I believe that's what happened, and I believe in terms of how power scaling works, it's literally the stats of the enemies, with the power of the enemies equals the stats of the enemies. And if you have higher power, it scales to your power rather than the original enemy's power. And so to back this theory up as well, if you look at the challenge maps, they start off at 50,000 power, they go up by 10,000 each time. And basically we always found it kind of fine up until like Blind Man's Pass, which is 170,000 power. And going beyond that, it started to get really, really challenging. What mainly happened was the enemies just killed you stupidly easily. You could still kill the enemies, but they just like started to one-shot you with so many things, and you know, go towards the end, it just gets insane. So that really backs up the theory that it's like from about 180,000 power, that's when the enemy damage just starts getting ridiculous. And I did a survey before making the sort of official suggestion to Rumble. I wanted to have an idea of how people were finding it at the different sort of stats levels and that kind of stuff. I will link this post in the description of this video, so you can go check it out. Just bear in mind, my theory on how power scaling works is the old theory in this post rather than the new theory. And anyway, so what I found was basically people started to really struggle after they got to like, well, it was in that range, 180 to 220. People started to find it just ridiculously hard, and beyond that, people said it was just practically impossible. So it was mainly the damage of the enemies, and what they've now done to fix power scaling is they've reduced the enemy health very slightly, and they've reduced the enemy damage massively. So it's just, you know, done what we needed really. Enemies are just a little bit easier to kill, doesn't matter too much, but you know, maybe that was just a bit too much ramping before. And then the enemies doing way too high damage, that's been fixed. So yeah, that's where we're at, and it seems that they've fixed it in a very good fashion. I can say that from testing as well. It looks a lot better. Might even be a little on the easy side actually, but that's maybe personal preference, and maybe because I've been used to it being challenging for quite a while now. So yeah, that's everything to do with power scaling. I'm not going to talk about that anymore now. So resistances are very complicated. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't follow it, and I won't really go into the full details here because it can get confusing. But basically, you have to have your stats above a certain amount in order to be able to have good attack speed, to be able to crit in events, and then also to be able to do extra damage with crits. The base damage done by crits is 1.5 times, so 50% more than a normal hit. However, you can get that up to 8.5 times as the maximum if you have an amount over the resistance. So let's say, well, if you look at the example here, crit damage rating, the resistance of 10,300. So if you hit that point, it hasn't made any difference yet. But in the next 700, so up to 11,000, then you add 7 times more to your crits. So they go from the 1.5 times to the 8.5 times. If you go over 11,000 crit damage rating, then it doesn't actually make any difference. But that range, it's important to be able to hit that range and go beyond it. Now, the important things to note about resistance is, firstly, the crit damage rating is the one that you really need to get high stats for. Attack speed and crit rating, they kind of happen earlier, so it's quite easy to get to the point where you crit with your attacks and you have good attack speed. But getting your crit damage higher, that takes a bit more stats. That's the final point you kind of get. And the other thing to note is it's very important that you're able to get your crit damage up, because if you go into an event and you don't have enough stats, but let's say you do crit, you do have the better attack speed, but your crit damage rating, you're just into that range, so you're doing like 2.5 times damage. You are doing like 1/3 or less of the damage compared to other people in that, and that makes an enormous difference. Like, I think that goes without saying. You need to be able to do enough damage, and being at least on the higher range of that, so say from like, using these numbers again with the 10,300, 11,000 being that sort of capped point where you don't get any more beyond that, you need to be able to get to, I don't know, like 10,700, 10,800, like close to the cap in order to be able to do good damage, and preferably at the cap. If you're not at that point, you're going to have a hard time doing the event. That's just how it is. So my suggestion to Rumble was to kind of just eliminate this difficulty so that everyone is at the cap if they have the right kind of stats for doing the event, and they don't need to kind of like be beyond those stats in order to actually get a proper chance, especially because resistances aren't explained. I was kind of annoyed with the fact that it's like a lot of people, they feel like they should be able to do elite event, especially because the suggested power is so low, but when they go into it, they do barely any damage. And they see other people go in, and those people do like way more damage than they do, and it's just confusing because they only have like, you know, stats a bit higher. But anyway, so what they've done was this, what I suggested with resistances is basically reduce them massively so that people can all be doing similar kind of damage, and then doing more damage and stuff will be based on getting your elemental stats up, getting your skill runes set up, you know, that kind of thing. And enemies can be scaled based on your power and that kind of stuff to quite nicely scale the difficulty. They didn't quite do that, but they did lower the resistances, so you don't need to be what it was before. So before, what I found from testing was that it was full gear, like current gear setup, that is mythic sets on everything, the mythic items, mythic or artifact items from tournament. So you have the kind of all the current gear stuff. Wings don't matter because they don't give stats for that. And then you have promotion at 300. Now 300 is the kind of end point for a lot of players. It takes a long time to get to promotion 300, and it's at that point that you hit the cap for crit damage rating. So before that point, in the kind of range of 200 to 300 was where you really needed to be. Sorry, I'm saying 200 to 300 promotion, that is. You really needed to be in that range to be doing good damage on events, or on elite events that we're talking about here. And like at 300 is where you start, you know, really being able to do it. I felt that was too much. It takes a long time to get to that point, and elite should be accessible for a fair number of the fair amount of the player base. And I think being able to do at least decent enough damage is an important thing. So what they changed it to is roughly 100 promotion less than that. That's what I've heard. However, from my testing, I found it to be slightly different from that. So crit damage rating is the thing which we really need to focus on here, because attack speed and crit rating, you get them at much lower stats. So like what I've from my testing, I found out with current gear, 0 promotion, you have the max crit rating, you have the max attack speed. So they're not really a problem here. We're talking about crit damage rating predominantly. For crit damage rating, I found it was roughly 100 promotion with the most current gear to actually hit the cap. So only 100 compared to the 300 before. Now saying that, this is just with my kind of testing right now with like the current gear I've got, and my stats are probably a little bit higher than they would necessarily be, because I have got full Fabled sets, I've got the mythic rewards from tournaments and stuff. So I think realistically it's somewhere in the range from 100 promotion to 200 promotion is where you hit the resistances for everything. So, you know, you've got the highest attack speed, you've got the highest crit rating, and you've got the highest crit damage rating too. I think probably about 100 promotion is where it's going to be very, elite event is going to be very accessible. And from that point, you can then, you know, it becomes easier over the next amount of promotion before you hit the caps, and then it's like based on other stuff. So yeah, that sounds a lot more reasonable. I am very happy with this change. And like I said, overall, I think things are maybe slightly a little bit easy, but that could be, you know, done with the power scaling. They could just amp up the difficulty very slightly, but that's, you know, that's personal preference, and I'm not going to go into that. I don't want to upset anyone by saying, you know, we should make this game harder. So yeah, the promotion, that's where we're at with the resistances. And from here, I'm going to show different setups in the event and how it kind of looks, and we're going to talk through how it plays, you know, whether it's challenging or not. The only thing to add before we go into the first run is that was all talking about elite event. For platinum event, you don't need 100 promotion. I've actually found you need 0 promotion. You just need to get the current gear and have full sets, and then you can, you know, have the high crit damage rating and stuff. So it's just elite event that you need. There are a little higher requirements to be able to do it. So this first run, what we're going to do is I've got the current sets. I've got a few elemental jewels, so my elemental stats are at 96% on all of them. I think that's not too unreasonable. You know, people can build on those. They get some from promotion and stuff. Right now, I have got 0 battle wings, and I've got 0 promotion. So this is kind of like full-on base stuff, just with the current gear, because, you know, I've got to have something. So yeah, current gear, and you can see my 160,000 power, and this elite event, well, platinum event is 150,000. So yeah, we're going to go into elite event now, and have a look at what it's like. Also, I got all Scourns set up and my skill points set up. So, you know, we have got a nice build here. All my Scourns are maxed. But it's not, you know, it's not anything excessive. This is kind of like a bit more like low level, what it's going to be like. So as you can see, taking a little bit of damage, nothing too crazy, but there weren't too many enemies. I can run in here and I'm going to polymorph these. They're kind of distracted by the NPC thing that they kill here. I've got to take down the flag bearer first, so I can start hurting these guys. And didn't take too long to kill, but did take a little bit of effort. You can see I was getting hit there. I didn't have the armor buff on. I'll just run back in. I'm not going to use the bubble, but I've got the armor buff on. You can see I'm taking hits, but it's not crazy. I'm not dying too quickly. And the enemies take a bit of punishment, like I said, but it's not too crazy. So that's kind of generally how this feels when I've tested this. Is if you've got enough stats to do the event, and then it's possible to do. Just a little challenging, like, you know, you do take damage, you do take a little bit of effort to kill the enemies. I'm going to show you the crits in a second. I'll just get rid of this flag bearer. Okay, so if I'm attacking this enemy, you can see the damage I'm doing is about 200 and something thousand, low 200,000s. On non-crits, it's not going to show many here, but I'm doing like 60,000. So I'm doing roughly 3 times damage with crits. My resistance, the resistance for this, I believe, is like 10,800 or something. I can't remember exactly. You can probably work out the numbers better than me. I'm trying to talk here and play. But yeah, basically, I'm slightly over the resistance for crit damage rating. So I'm doing a little bit extra with my crits, but not much, which you can tell from the damage I'm dealing to the enemies. It's quite low, but it is possible for me to kill the enemies. It's not like the minimum, and you can see I'm critting with everything too. Like my attack speed's good, as you can see here, and I did obviously die, but that's because I'm not really playing properly at that bit. So yeah, that's how things feel at this power level and with this kind of setup. Let's move on to another one now. The next run we're going to do is just slightly more power. You can see 173,000 here rather than 160. All I've done is increase my promotion by 100, which importantly has made my crit damage rating high enough that I will now be doing kind of max damage with my crits. My elemental stats have gone up a tiny bit. I haven't really fiddled with those. I'll just show you 100 promotion here, and I haven't got any battle wings, as you could probably guess by my power not going up massively. I just realised I need to buy event tokens. But anyway, so this will hopefully be quite a bit easier. I'll be killing the enemies a lot easier. The enemies themselves killing me, maybe not too much difference because my stats haven't changed too much. So they'll still be able to kill me quite easily. But we saw last time it wasn't too bad. They weren't killing me too easily. So let's have a look at what this is like. Now, bear in mind, I said earlier on, this is 100 promotion, but it's not with it's with slightly higher stats than you probably have at 100 promotion. So it's more realistically like 150, maybe, you know, towards 200 promotion. So this is kind of what you're at when you're at that kind of level. So getting hit by the enemies, you can see I take reasonable damage, similar-ish to before, you know, not too different there. But I can definitely kill these enemies a lot more easily. I'll go around and kill some more enemies. Actually, I'll skip those because the knights are going to come in and help me there. So let's move in, take down the flag bearer. I can quite easily take down that flag bearer quickly, then attack the enemies, and you can see they're dying off really quite nicely. Now this is what most people will be facing when they do Platinum event, because most people, they'll hit this point, they'll be geared up, you know, well enough, and they'll have some promotion, maybe in the region of 100 to 200. I think that's quite reasonable to get to in not too long a time. And so most people will be fighting in this range, I believe, doing Platinum event, and it's very easy, very accessible. Shouldn't say very easy, that's more of an opinion thing. So yeah, very accessible by the looks of it, and I like how that is. This last run now, I have maxed my wings, so they are giving me 42,000 power, along with some stats. And then also I've put my promotion to maximum. So as you can see, my armor is now very, very high. My power is enormous. My elemental stats have gone up a fair amount too. It's impossible to to get high stats without getting some elemental stats too. So I've got high elemental stats, and yeah, everything's big. I'll just show you my promotion here is at 3,000. So we're easily gonna, we're gonna be critting. We're gonna be doing the max with crit damage. So it's seeing now the power scaling, how much power scaling is really affecting things, whether it will make it challenging or whether it will, not be doing enough and it's actually really easy. So the enemies, how are they dying? Well, it feels roughly similar to before. So power scaling has come into play against my elemental stats that have increased. So the damage is roughly similar to before. Maybe I'm doing slightly more damage than I was before, than the last run we did. So you're a little stronger than that. And in terms of dying, well, my health is not dropping much. I'm gonna really engage with the enemies the next time and let them hit me, so we can see. I'm gonna put my armor buff on, and then I'm gonna run in here and get hit by some enemies. I'll just take out that flag bearer because it's going to be annoying healing the enemies. If they will actually kill it. I don't know what these enemies are doing. Come on, guys, fight me. There we go. So if you watch my health, I am not taking much damage. Well, actually, I'm dodging all those things, to be fair. If we can, once this enemy's down, this NPC's down, I'm going to be attacked a bit more. So I'm actually dodging a lot of the stuff. But when I get hit, I'm not taking an enormous amount of damage. And if we go to the time it's the boss, you'll see I'm not taking much damage from things in general. That's what I've experienced when doing this testing, is that at the higher power levels, the power scaling goes up, and it's like, the enemies have a bit more health, so it's scaled, so it's only a little bit easier in terms of how easily you're killing the enemies, and the damage they're dealing is definitely more, but you have a lot more armor when you it's impossible to not get loads more armor when you do promotion and stuff, and basically it means that the enemies have a harder time killing you. That's what I've noticed. So yeah, I think personally I would be happy if they made things very slightly harder, but it's nice that we don't have the crazy difficulty we had before. Like, I'd rather it be this way than the other way. So let's have a look at the boss now, so you can see the bosses do, they can kill me, but not with every attack. Just with the big attacks, they're going to do a lot of damage. So I've got no armor buff on. I've got this 4 million armor right now, and if he slams down, you can see it took off like half my health. There's, it's doing damage. It's just not that difficult, from what I can tell. So that's where we seem to be with power scaling resistances. I hope that's informative for everyone and keeps everyone, informed. So we all know where it's at. Hopefully things don't get messed up as things go on. I think the master maps are a little bit too easy now, because they were always made as like the most challenging bit of content, and now that power scaling has been reduced, it's also affected the challenge maps, so they're very accessible. So yeah, I'm asking Rumble to make them a bit harder again, but nowhere near the difficulty that they were before. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in another video soon.